Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Voice of Authority webinar brought to you today by Wilmot Dixon. My name is Toby Fox. I'm the Managing Director at 3Fox, the marketing agency for councils. And our job is to keep our network of councils and developers and influencers and their advisors connected. Since the pandemic began, we've been working through this online channel, the Voice of Authority, a platform for councils to discuss their ambitions and challenges and influences and issues of urgency. And today, our focus returns to the Hertfordshire Growth Board for the last in our series of 3 webinars looking at the progress made by the Growth Board over the last year. You can watch the previous episodes at thevoiceofauthority.co.uk or on the 3Fox channel on YouTube. In this last session, we'll be looking at the Hertfordshire Growth Board's ambitions for 2022 and their feasibility. In particular, we're going to be asking what sustainable growth actually means for the local authorities of Hertfordshire, for their delivery partners, and for the county's people and communities. And we're going to look at how the Growth Board and its partners are translating green ideas into future ways of living and working. And that's in the context of the Growth Board's plans for 100,000 new jobs and 100,000 new homes to meet local needs over the next 15 years, and the impact that's going to have on schools and health and social care and all of the already congested road and rail network. So these are meaty issues, and we've got a very tasty panel to address them, forgive me. It's a pleasure to introduce to the Voice of Authority in alphabetical order, the Right Honourable Professor Paul Burstow, who is Independent Chair at Hertfordshire and West Essex Sustainability and Transformation Partnership, and Richard Davidson, who is Director at Wilmot Dixon, with Neil Hayes, who is the Chief Executive of Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, Councillor Linda Hasey, who's the leader of East Hertfordshire District Council, and Professor Julie Newland, MBE, who is Pro-Vice Chancellor for Business and International Development at the University of Hertfordshire. And last and very much not least, Councillor Richard Roberts, who is leader of Hertfordshire County Council and also the chair of the Hertfordshire Growth Board. Now, make the most of this stellar panel, viewers, and fire in your questions through the Q&A function throughout the event today. We'll address as many of those as we can during the course of the conversation. And we've also got a few polls for you, so you can contribute to the discussion by responding to those when they pop up on your screen. And why don't we get everyone involved straight away by launching one of those now? So I'm going to run the first of our polls, which is asking what the single biggest growth challenge facing Hertfordshire is. And while you respond to that, viewers, I'm going to introduce the first of our speakers today, who is going to talk a little bit about the Growth Board's prioritising of sustainable growth over the next year. Councillor Richard Roberts, where are your priorities for sustainable growth in 2022?
Priorities for this year, and I would say 22 running into 23. They have to build on COP26. They have to build on the strength of our commitments, both as a county council, but as a growth board, where we are committed by 2030 to be carbon neutral. And we know that we have to take our residents on a journey. Getting rid of that. We have to take our residents on the journey of change to start to understand, to help our residents adapt and to mitigate the fact that climate is changing, the fact the environment we live in is changing, and that the way we as a council work with our residents is going to have to evolve, and really quite quickly.
Great stuff, Richard. Thanks for that. And how does that translate into priorities for sort of health and well-being, for the environment, for sustainable development? Can you unpack it a little bit for us for what the Growth Board's actually going to set out to achieve? Absolutely.
I think coming out of COVID, ensuring that we work with our residents so that they have the best possible health and the most fulfilled lives they possibly can have is going to be essential. We know that some of our communities, they're out cycling and running, they're wearing their lycra, they're just very visible. And some of our communities, that isn't happening. And what COVID showed us was we have got to reach out and work harder so that everybody has the opportunity to take part in what is a vibrant society that we live in here in Hertfordshire, with great green spaces, great access to the countryside, great opportunities to work. All of that is available to everyone, but I think we as authorities have to work, and that's why I'm talking about the growth boards. I'm talking about our districts, our 10 districts and our county council. We have to work together with health. It's great to have Paul on the call today, and of course with our business community, to make sure that our residents have every opportunity. The challenge, of course, is, and that's the point of this call, is that we need to start doing this slightly more responsibly, more carefully, in regard to the environment in which we live. And we know that we need to tackle air pollution, we need to improve water quality, we need to use less resource, and have a slightly lighter carbon footprint across our county. Those are the challenges. I think we've got to be absolutely up for them. I think we need to accelerate what we're actually doing in this year 22-23.
We've had this conversation before, Richard, but I think it's worth digging back into. And there is this sort of elephant in the room with growth, isn't there? Which is the phrase sustainable growth an oxymoron? You know, can you create 100,000 new homes and 100,000 new jobs in a sustainable way? And given that the transport system's already pretty congested, given that the worries that people, the anxieties that people have around schools, around access to GPs and dentists and so on.
I think, almost building on the answer I just gave, at a micro level, every individual has the opportunity to do something different. In the ways that I suggested, at a macro level, we have to start thinking about inviting our residents to move away from petrol and diesel, and quite quickly into electric vehicles and or alternatives. Public transport that is electric powered. We know that up in Stevenage that we have got electric buses on the horizon, and we have cycle networks increasingly starting to be connected. We have to enable all of our communities to be connected digitally so that they don't have to get into their car to go to work or necessarily commute 5 days a week, but they could do it, say, 2 or 3 days a week. I think there is a huge cultural change coming along. Some may say sustainability and development are oxymorons, they are not neat, but I argue that actually, if you think of this in terms of a glass half full, I think that the benefits of having well-insulated homes, supported by, for example, air source heat pumps, where we're moving away from a carbon-heavy agenda, I think those are positives, and I think that's what we must take our residents with us. Whatever we do, the way that we communicate, the way that we consult, the way that we engage is going to be absolutely vital in the next very few years.
And speaking of that, I mean, we looked in the last session at the Hart transport system, the new transport system that's being planned. It's quite interesting to hear what sort of feedback you got after we presented the video and had that conversation. What's the latest on that?
It's really quite positive. I think people are curious as to what it might actually look like, and you know, I don't want to preempt, but I think we know it's almost certainly going to have wheels. We're not looking at something that's heavy rail. We're looking at a transport system that is probably only just evolving, because this won't land for 10 years. So I think there's a real positivity. And only this last week, we're looking at the sustainable transport options for Watford, and also options coming forward for the old MLS line. So if you like, where London backed away from supporting the new line into Watford and the stations there, actually industry coming forward now saying we would like the option of linking, and if that links to Hart, we've got Watford, Hemel, St Albans linked to a cross east-west transit system, and that needs to really encourage people onto it. So I'm very positive, and the feedback's been positive as well.
Great stuff. Okay, well, let's have a turn to our audience and take their temperature a bit. Let's ask the audience whether what they see as the priorities for the growth board match what you see as the priorities over the next year. So we'll launch that next poll. And while we're doing that, while you're responding to that, viewers, let's turn to our next speaker, and I'll introduce Councillor Linda Hasey in her capacity as political lead for the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership at the Growth Board. Linda, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. And this is so timely, this webinar, because there's so many complex parts of the jigsaw which are now starting to fall into place. And I think one of the most important ones is actually the extraordinary attitude change within individuals as to how they want to live their lives. Particularly, you know, the young people and, you know, us on the other end of the spectrum. It is now across all ages. But I wanted to just go into some of the complexities that we have in local authorities as to how we are going to make this work. And I thought all local authorities do have a chart, and I thought I'd show you a simplified chart of how the green growth fits into the Hertfordshire Growth Board. And I want to talk specifically about two, possibly three of the boxes. Now, one of the green ones is called the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, or the HCCSP, and we will be putting the contact website in the chat in a minute. This was set up just over a year ago. It covers all 11 authorities and the LEP, and has worked incredibly well in looking at the topics which are important for all of us across Hertfordshire. And they've already completed action plans for biodiversity, transport, carbon reduction, and water. And there are two others which are in the pipeline, which are additionality and also behavioural change. This is mostly working on examples and best practice across Hertfordshire, but also it means that we are sharing, and that means we also have a sound platform for anything that might be coming through from government or elsewhere in terms of looking for input and money, which is always pretty key when we're talking about some of this. The other one I want to talk about is the Hertfordshire Infrastructure and Development Forum, which is in the bottom right-hand corner in the grey. This was set up just 6 months ago, and it is a working forum between developers, promoters, landowners, and local authorities. Over the last couple of years within the Growth Board, we felt that there has been a gap between what we all need to understand from each other. Some of the developers out there, and Wilmot Dixon is a wonderful example, they really want to push the barriers on how we develop housing and the infrastructure that goes with it in a green and sustainable way. We as local authorities need to have the right policies and plans in place to enable that to happen. But also, for those who don't, some developers don't see it quite at the top of their priorities, enabling us to have a little bit of a leverage to make them do things. And I think we've had one session on the Infrastructure and Development Forum where we have pushed and pushed and pushed that we want to build good quality housing in Hertfordshire. We have all said we do not want some of the examples of what has been built over the last 20 years. We are looking at the next 50 years, and it has to be very different to what we've done historically. So that's really where we are in Hertfordshire, in local authorities. As Richard has said, it is a very complex joining together. It needs changes from all of us. None of us as an individual or as one body can make any of this work. It has to be a coordinated, straightforward way. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I'm just going to share the results of that last poll because it's quite interesting. I'm not sure what to make of it. The climate agenda is the most significant aim and objective or priority for the HGB, according to our audience, for 15% of viewers. But delivery of infrastructure is the priority for 33% viewers. So Linda, what you're saying about the infrastructure delivery board, I mean, clearly that's an absolutely vital aspect of the work of the growth board from the point of view of our viewers and your communities. And we've got a question in from a viewer, Samuel Buchneck, sorry, a question in the chat from Janice, who's asking about national highways. Are they allowed into the Infrastructure Development Forum?
At the moment, they're not a member, but certainly it is. We're a very inclusive group, and if they feel as though they are able to contribute, then I think we would welcome them totally. I suppose highways is sort of slightly fragmented. So you've got Highways England, or I think they've changed their name. We've got the Highways Authority within County Council. And it's not an easy aspect to pull in. But I think also we must not just look at infrastructure as roads. As Richard has said, we have really got to move away from, if you build a piece of tarmac and put a car on it, it will soon fill up with other cars. So you're never, ever actually addressing the problem of a car is still a metal box with four wheels. And we have the car in front of you, you may not want it there because it's causing a traffic jam, but you're the car behind the one that is already causing the traffic jam. So I think it's part and parcel of looking at how do we really change the way that we live, other aspects of sustainable transport, and working from home. And we've seen, some of our local town centres, for example, and when apart from Watford and Stevenage, we all have market towns in our area. Most of them have actually done pretty well coming out of COVID, because people are working from home and they go and shop locally. So I think, again, we have to get away from the fact that infrastructure is a piece of tarmac. It's not. It's a lot of other things.
I guess there's also that important point that infrastructure and climate change are so intricately linked as well. And the point you're making is that you can't address climate change without addressing infrastructure and vice versa. So let's just delve a bit deeper into this. I mean, in terms of delivering on what you're setting out to with the growth board, Linda, what do you see as the biggest challenges that you're facing?
I think there are two challenges. One is, as I've already mentioned, it is the perception of individuals that we all have the right to park our car outside our house and go wherever we want to at whatever time of the day or night in the time that we want to do it in. And I think that has got to start changing. We have to be a lot more pragmatic, flexible in what we may well have to give up some of our own freedoms that we have been used to over the last 30 or 40 years. I think the other thing is infrastructure is expensive. We cannot just rely on the contributions from developers to actually make sure that some of this infrastructure can be delivered. And that is infrastructure for digital connectivity, health, and Paul will talk about this later, community centres, schools, affordable housing. It's a very broad section of requirements. And we can only do that, I think, with government assistance. And long-term assured government assistance. It's not suddenly a grant popping up that you have to fill out a form for 2 months' time to get the money and spend it within 6 months. It has to be long-term, sustainable foundation for what we are able to gain. And that is all part and parcel of what the Hertfordshire Growth Board is all about, and our push into county deals, and part and parcel of the levelling up.
Okay, you've said the magic words, Linda. I thought we were edging into the territory of levelling up there, and at that point I'm going to open this conversation up slightly across our panel. We'll start with Richard. As a county, the Growth Board has approached government for the funding to support your sustainable growth plans. What update can you give us on that and the direction of travel for attracting government investment?
I wish I could. You know that we applied for a county deal, and that was really building on the success of Linda's contribution with Linda Hazy with the Growth Board around Gilston and securing funding to pay for some of the infrastructure that Linda was referring to. And we need more of that across the county. We absolutely have got to be committed to that. But I think it's got tied up with Michael Gove's need to look at local government reform, looking at how to address inequalities, which is the levelling up agenda. And we have that in Hertfordshire, and I referred to that earlier. But it's also about long-term funding, north-south. We can't have funding in the north and not in the south. The Hertfordshire economy, as all of us will know on this call, is hugely valuable to the nation. We have to look after our economy here. We have to support our businesses, and we have to ensure that we're still attractive. Levelling up is much more than about individual communities. It is that layering of support that goes right through our socioeconomic and environmental imperatives across the county.
Thanks, Richard. And Linda, from your perspective, and you brought the subject up, how are we going to lever that investment from government that's required? How affordable is sustainable growth?
I think we have to recognise that sustainable growth, or the aspirations for some of us in local authority in terms of ensuring that everything is built in a sustainable way, it's expensive. But then you need to look at the business case of the actual build versus the running cost of a residence or a council building. I'll come back to an example that there is in Cornwall, where there was a small developer who wanted to, and they were being pushed by the Cornish Council to build a small development of sustainable houses. And the developer said, no, we won't ever be able to sell them for what we need to be able to sell them to make them commercially viable for us. So the council said, okay, we'll underwrite it. And then in the end, and I'm not suggesting that any of us are going to do that, however, it is an interesting model, but as soon as those houses went on the market, they sold at a premium. So I think there is a general move that actually, if you build the right sort of house with the right sort of running costs and the right sort of, it's not just fabric first, then residents will start looking at it in a positive way, and they're asking for it now. 5 years ago, if you went to look at buying a house, the last thing you would have asked was, well, what's your digital connectivity? Whereas now you expect it. People cannot sell their houses often because the digital connectivity is so poor. So I think it's coming, as Sharon Taylor has put in the chat. We have to know that we have government support for what we want to do. And Richard is absolutely right. Levelling up is not just the funds from central government going into the northern areas, which desperately do need it, but it is also, we do have areas of deprivation in Hertfordshire, and we do need to make sure that all our residents actually have access to good quality lives and jobs and places to live.
Great, thanks. I want to come on to the well-being aspects of that with Paul in a second, but let's go to Richard Davidson first. Richard, we're talking here about making housing, very specifically making housing sustainable. Is this all about increasing the cost? Is it a sustainability premium?
Some products cost more. I can't deny that. I think as we talk about cost, and we forget to talk about value. We forget to talk about, Linda just mentioned there about lower energy bills, which is a real value add if you're purchasing something new. We've started to see, in the last 10 years, more people buy organic food, which comes at a premium rate, but they're doing it because they're thinking about their health, about their future. I think it's also is when you look at the cost of building something, so we're very specific, it's a very niche part, it's a small part maybe of the overall cost, is about being that leveling up is about being also able to stimulate new skills, about engaging with people, creating a broader society, a broader place in which they want to enjoy to work and live. So I think when we talk about the cost, I understand, a brick is a brick is a brick, and that's how much they cost. I can't change that particularly. I can build in a different method, which also can promote other benefits, whether that's creating new businesses in Hertfordshire, which then changes that tax revenue. We can build out of products that are renewable, easier to fix, which can stimulate new trades. So I think when we can talk very easily about what something costs today, we are less good at talking about the value we've created for the future and the cost of not doing the right thing as well. I never see that on a balance sheet. someone saying, well, the cost of building it to the lowest regulation is this. I haven't explained what the cost of that carbon is for the next 25 years on that building. And I think that's something missing from the cost discussion. It's certainly missing from Michael Gove's department. It's not there yet, but they are maybe moving towards it. We could talk forever about cost, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Richard. We could talk forever about levelling up as well. There are so many different aspects, but just on one of them that Linda touched on earlier, which was around the fact that there are areas of deprivation within Hertfordshire. Paul, from outside Hertfordshire, there's probably a rosy view of the place. That it's a land of flowers and sunshine and gardens and happy, wealthy, prosperous people. From your point of view, in terms of sort of health and well-being, what's the view with a levelling up agenda of Hertfordshire?
Well, of course, Toby, it is all of those things you've just listed, but behind that, there's also deprivation. You've heard that referred to by colleagues. You know, there are parts of the county which are less well resourced in terms of the community assets that are available for them to access. And have less on different opportunities. So there is a broader agenda, which is that recognising levelling up is not just north versus south, or south being given priority over north, or vice versa. It is about recognising that levelling up is an agenda that has to apply wherever you are. We have a 7-year life expectancy gap across the county. That's another marker, if you like, of the challenge that we have to face together. And we won't fix that by a healthcare system working in isolation. One of the things I will be talking about is the absolute need for us to see health as being an asset and something we have to work on together to actually really be an improvement.
Right, thanks, Paul. Okay, that's nearly enough on levelling up. I've got one more question. We just want to ask our audience about another aspect of levelling up, which is the level of priority that place-based growth has within the levelling up agenda. So we're going to ask the audience that question while I introduce our next speaker, who is Neil Hayes, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. Now, Neil, we've talked a bit about local authority roles. We talked a little bit about the private sector perspective, and we'll have more of that later. But your role today really is to excite us about how the LEP is going to turbocharge the green recovery in Hertfordshire. So over to you.
There's a challenge. Thanks, Toby. I guess where we're coming from in all of this is the fact that actually we've got businesses and individuals in the county that can provide some of these solutions. So we have assets dotted around the county that are actively, whether it's been in a university, whether it's some of our institutions like Rothamsted or the Building Research Establishment, they are actually figuring out solutions to some of these challenges on a global basis, but happen to be based in Hertfordshire. So can we harness some of that thinking and deploy it in Hertfordshire in any way, shape or form? So I guess in terms of the LEP, the majority of our work is focused on the enterprise zone, Hertfordshire IQ, which might be familiar to some of the audience, and that's in partnership with the County Council, St Albans and Dacorum. And the whole focus on that, there are enterprise zones across the country. We won a proposal for one in Hertfordshire, but the focus on that is around the envirotech sector. So it's about trying to not only attract, but grow those industries in Hertfordshire, because if we look at it purely on an economic basis, those industries will need to grow simply because of burgeoning demands. Why can't they grow in Hertfordshire? And actually, whilst they're doing that, can they deploy some of that knowledge and expertise to some of the problems we're grappling in as partners within the Growth Board? So, a win-win situation. So that then got us thinking on some more areas. I've got a couple of slides. Richard started talking at the beginning about the value of the economy, and yes, hugely powerful economy, £40 billion. We've got great growth in terms of our key sectors. And when we were working out our strategy going back nearly a couple of years ago now, we took a pause and started thinking about, well, how do we, rather than just look purely at the economics, what do we do to sort of foster good growth in the county? So over the past 12 months, we've been looking at kind of 3 themes. And this is very much, it's still work in process. It's still being discussed at the Growth Board, but we're looking at digital, clean growth and inclusive growth. So rather than just have unadulterated growth, what can we do to sort of make sure that it benefits our local people? What can we do to make sure that the growth captures some of those technologies? And what can we do to kind of enable that growth to be future-proof? So we're focusing on digital infrastructure as much as we are on historic sort of road and rail infrastructure, etc. So we go to the next slide. So part of that work we've been doing, which is focusing on both our organisation, but also frame within the growth board. And in terms of the sort of clean growth work, what we're focusing on is the bits the left take forward, and also that wider context which we were talking about earlier. So in terms of what does makes up that clean growth strategy, there are kind of three main functions. Clean growth is the sort of the underlying thing, which is around what we've talked about, that overarching ambition in the economy of a whole, to sort of reduce carbon emissions, recognizing that's very complex. But also, you know, as I mentioned, we've got what's commonly called low carbon environmental goods and services, bit of jargon there, but they're the kind of businesses that their job is to sort of focus on this area. So whether it's mitigating environmental impacts, lower carbon solutions. So, you know, for example, you know, we won't be the home of the offshore wind energy, obviously, in Hertfordshire, but some of our businesses are providing those component parts to go into those wind turbines that go overseas. So it's about understanding what are the opportunities within that sector for growth, as we would say with any sector. So with its film or life sciences, you know, we have a nascent and growing sector, and actually that's really important. And I think when we talk about clean tech and envirotech, they're all about, you know, the things we've talked about earlier: reducing water consumption, land pollution, energy use. And, you know, if you look at the likes of the Building Research Establishment, you know, what they're trying to do is pulling together new technologies. And we're talking about sustainable homes earlier. How can they move to more modular housing, more renewable energy being used, being a more digitally focused homes that can actually change as families evolve through the generations, that you can move your home rather than moving out, you can repurpose your home and move forward. How can those technologies be applied at a greater scale? So that that was the kind of focus of the clean growth strategy. And so obviously some of those objectives the LEP can take forward, and some of those are broader within partners. So if we can have the next slide. As Linda says, we do like a diagram here. So yeah, the first one is, you know, sort of two main areas of focus. One is around growing that sector in Hertfordshire. And again, we've got things like the enterprise zone, which really focuses on providing space, support, networking to help establish those low carbon environmental goods and services sectors. Again, we talked about skills. You know, if we're going to be building EV charging infrastructure, if we're going to be building the heat pumps required to replace gas boiler systems, you're going to need people to install them, and at a scale. And in a Hertfordshire, you know, if it's going to be building 100,000 homes, you're going to need enough people to sort of be able to fit those homes against those new technologies. So that's really important. And there's also the kind of the other pillar, which is the wider discussion we were talking about earlier, which is around how we transition our homes, our businesses, our people in terms of their skill sets to focus on this sector and actually keep providing you know, input to the economy, keep providing jobs, keep providing businesses, but also doing it in a way that actually improves our overall environmental offset our environmental sort of contributions to the Hertfordshire. So you can see there are, as you can see in pillar 2, that's around, you know, transitioning. For example, you know, your average business, every single business can probably do more to transition towards being more carbon friendly, reducing their carbon. We could talk with businesses about infrastructure and their use of vehicles, how we can improve EV charging infrastructure within businesses, for example. There's lots of practical things that we can do. And actually, what, you know, when we were speaking to a lot of businesses in development of this clean growth strategy, it's not necessarily all pie in the sky. There's actually very practical stages that we can take forward. I think one of the challenges is we're in, particularly with this sector, we're always constantly pursuing perfection. So we're waiting for the next super bit of technology to arrive, when actually we work with what we've got, inevitably through, you know, innovation, things will improve, battery technology, sustainability in terms of insulation. All of that stuff gets better as we move along. But what we're trying to do here is give us a framework both to sort of grow our business base in the area in Hertfordshire, but also for our existing businesses and individuals benefit from that growth. So that's essentially where we've got to. And as I say, it's being discussed at the Growth Board in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Neil. That's really helpful. And obviously an intensive amount of work. But my favourite phrase: "There's an elephant in the room," isn't there? With the LEP, and that is that the government's focus has changed away from prioritising LEPs as a means of delivery. What can you give us an update on your take on that, Neil? And then I'm going to ask Councillor Roberts as well from the point of view of the sort of the county.
I wish I could. This is another one of these issues that's tied up with the Levelling Up white paper. We simply don't know. My personal take, I think it will play out differently in different places. Yeah. We've had discussions at our board around Christmas, just before Christmas, and I think we've had really strong support from our partners, including the county council, that this work needs to continue. Whether government sees LEPs or they want another structure or they want something else is kind of by the by. We need to have a clean growth strategy. We need to grow our key sectors. We need to make sure the job opportunities are there for people in communities. We need to make sure that what we're doing is inclusive. So the day job will still be there. Whether it's something called a LEP, your guess is as good as mine, Toby, at this stage, unfortunately. But we're just focusing on the job.
Thanks, Neil. Fair enough. And Richard, it has been a really valuable partnership. The LEP has contributed a lot to the work of the Growth Board, in my experience of working with you over the last 2-3 years. What's the county's take?
So I would say not past tense. I would say it is really valuable working with the LEP, and I will be quite emphatic in saying, and I've said this already in public, that Hertfordshire needs an entity that supports business and helps all of us as partners to ensure that clean growth, that Hertfordshire remains an attractive place to develop in, that all of us understand the needs of business. Because let's face it, I think it's something we haven't actually acknowledged. Business is already engaged in the green agenda. Business is already on to responsible and sustainable growth. We've got to make sure that we as a county are attractive for that growth. And I think the LEP and business support is part of that. It's part, there is this whole raft of interconnected support that's needed to ensure that residents thrive, that businesses really want to come here and do well. Now we know we've got our big sectors. We know I've got our cell and gene and biopharma. We know we've got our culture, TV, media production. It's awesome. But what else do we need to do? Do we need to move the love around a bit? We've got a great focus around Stevenage at the moment. But if we are to be an internationally, globally significant player in biopharma and vaccine production, all of that, we might just need to move further afield. And we need to make sure that we're all connected. And our residents will all benefit from that, because this isn't just importing jobs from elsewhere. It is about bringing it to Hertfordshire, and those jobs are going to come out of Hatfield or Broxbourne or Hempstead or Stevenage or Watford. That's what's going to happen. And I think we've got to plan this. It's all tied into that levelling up agenda again, isn't it? But it absolutely is all of us thinking through strategically. And that's what the Growth Board is really about, is strategic thinking across the county. What can we do that brings the elements that are important to make sure that success continues? And the LEP is part of that.
There's the theme for the day is around collaboration and how significant it is in the mix of factors that attract investment and people to Hertfordshire. So I'm going to ask the audience what they think about the biggest draws of the county and the prominence of collaboration within that. And Richard, I think you just wanted to follow up.
Yeah, I was just following up on that. Is don't be afraid to be demanding as well as Hertfordshire. Is to say we want sustainable growth, and to make sure that we don't step backwards. So you might push the agenda forwards and say, right, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. There are lots of barriers, there are lots of naysayers who will be happy to pull us back. And I think it's to make sure that the systems you put in place are resilient enough, and ambitious enough to keep us going forward. And that was, you know, one of the conversations we had about the rapid transport system. And I think, yeah, let's be ambitious, because I think that's, lots of us want that to happen. So
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. And Neil, just briefly, and then we're going to move on to the next part of the conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo Richard's comments and illustrate a point. So for a good example, we've often talked about the growth of the film and TV sector. Actually, there's a sustainability issue with that sector. It's very logistics heavy. It's you know, a lot of energy is used to produce something, and then there's a lot of waste products as a result of it. So it's about a dialogue with industry to make sure how, as well as grow, how they can improve. So how they can reduce their carbon footprint, how we can use different technologies to change. So it's not just accepting growth at any cost. You can only do that with a dialogue. And I think that's what's important about the growth board, that we can bring that dialogue to the table.
Yeah, well said. And another thing that Neil said was that with 100,000 homes, you know, we need a lot of people to install the heat pumps, the EV chargers, and whatever technology is going to come next. So let's turn to our next speaker and talk a bit about how education is working hand in hand with the place, Hertfordshire, the place, to drive economic recovery. Julie Newland, MBE, you're Pro-Vice Chancellor at the University of Hertfordshire. How do you see that link up between your sector and all the other activity in Hertfordshire driving sustainable growth?
So I think we play an absolutely central and pivotal role in growing a knowledge-based economy. And I think then innovation, technical research-led innovation, and delivery of a skilled workforce are two vital component parts of that agenda. And to do that successfully, and I, of course, we can always do more and do better, but I think to do that successfully, I think Hertfordshire is actually the most fantastic case study, because the university is so networked into the local enterprise partnership, to the growth board, to Hertfordshire County Council, to the Hertfordshire Chamber. We are part of the enterprise zone, but we also, because of all of that, successfully won the opportunity to be a university enterprise zone. And so I think the county is incredibly networked, and we do add up to greater than the sum of our parts. That we really do. So that doesn't mean I'm complacent, and there is so much to do, but I think that's it's a vital part of how we play that role, and it really is working well. So how does that translate? What do we actually do? And I think I've said this before. For me, it's three areas. There's the whole business functions and how we support things like the Growth Hub. The university clearly have enterprise and entrepreneurial support functions in what you might call the marketing, access to finance, understanding strategic development, supporting entrepreneurs, opening up our university as an incubator. People can come and use the university. So we do all that traditional stuff, but we do it hand in hand with the LEP, with the Growth Hub, with the Chamber of Commerce. We don't duplicate. We work together, and we play a vital role in that. We then play a vital role, I suppose, in UK PLC and driving research that drives up productivity in agri-tech, in electric vehicles, hydrogen. I think a great example for universities is they can bring behaviours with technical breakthroughs, because technical breakthroughs don't always deliver if culture and behaviours don't change. So we have transport planners and we have engineers looking at electric vehicles, and universities play a vital role in bringing those things together. But driving up productivity through breakthroughs in agri-tech, in manufacturing, in materials, those all play a key role in the sustainability agenda. And then I think the third area, of course, is delivering a skilled workforce, and delivering that in a way that puts widening participation at the forefront, and the University of Hertfordshire is that sort of university. That is what we do. We would lay claim to that space. We're not a Russell Group. We do world-class research, but we do drive up that widening participation agenda. And if we're to have a skilled workforce in the numbers that we're going to need to grow UK PLC, then that widening participation agenda is not a nice to do. It's an absolute economic necessity. So that's in for me how we're contributing both nationally and most importantly in Hertfordshire. Thanks, Julie. Well, let's see how that links up both with the public sector in Hertfordshire and the private sector. Linda, in your capacity as a Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership Lead at the Growth Board, how successful do you see the links between the skills development, the education side, and the workforce that you have? I think there's still work to do, but I think what we need to do is make sure that we have the right jobs, the right education. I mean, Hertfordshire has the most fantastic schools. It has world-beating schools. So I think, we've got a very good, solid basis of our educated young people. But we also have to ensure that they understand that they don't necessarily have to go off to study history and philosophy, however intellectually interesting that might be. What they also need to do is understand that women can become building site managers and go into the building trade and actually learn skills which will be of value to them over the coming years. And I think the other thing is that, we do not all have a job for life now. We go through different phases of our lives, requiring different jobs. We do not stay with the same employer for 45 years. But it's also that means that the university has to be quite flexible in offering, and also our higher education colleges, offering education at an age group or a right stage of life to help people get on to the next career. And there is nothing wrong in learning something new in your 40s and 50s, which will then give you another span of life and interest, physical and also mental, for going forward. So there's a lot to do, but I think Julie and her colleagues are really on the button as to how we need to do it. And I should also mention, Adrian Hawkes, who used to be a member of the LEP board, and his enterprise apprenticeship work that he does with young people is innovative and it's aspirational. So a lot to do, but we're on the right path. It's a brilliant programme. Thanks, Linda. I'll come back to you in a second, Julie. I just want to get Richard's view, because I know for Wilmot Dixon, apprenticeships and skills development, so it's really close to the company's heart.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff there that Councillor Hazy just mentioned. I was thinking it's exactly what I was going to say around it's not just one career and you can reskill at different areas. I think what we found a real benefit is kind of taking more time to engage with university, understanding what they can do, and actually for us to then go back and working with other businesses to say what we're really looking for. And I think sometimes we can identify what we need kind of right now, and maybe we need a university to kind of stretch us to think a little bit further about what those skills could be in 5 to 10 years time. So I think we've really enjoyed that, and I've certainly worked with other colleagues of Julie's at the university and some of the associated colleges to kind of help change that curriculum. Then the other thing, of course, is getting into schools and encouraging young people to see that there's more than just the career that their parents have, that there's more than just the career that they have in a small book. And I think that's the hard work, I think, that Councillor Hazy mentioned, is we've got to really help people realise that the world of learning is a lifelong journey, not just a one-off. So, I think the one thing I'd ask is for more businesses to engage with the university and colleges and talk to them about what they're looking for. I think people are a bit scared, but once you're in, it's actually quite nice.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Richard. So, Julie, two sort of little threads there. One is, do you feel enough businesses are engaging with you to enable you to inspire those sort of future employees and deliverers of sustainable growth? And the second is, it's a fast-moving world, isn't it? And our focus on sustainable growth actually really underlines the rapid changes in technology that we're all having to get used to. So how's the university adapting to meet future employment needs that we don't know yet the scale of?
Right, well, if I start with that one, of course, one of the roles of universities is to create the future. So that's that's always the rub there. And so I think educating young people so that they can create the future rather than respond to it is part of the role of a university. And I think Linda makes a very, very good point, but I think around that construction, engineering, science, technology, encouraging women to go into those things, and encouraging people that perhaps think that the traditional subjects are the only ones on offer is absolutely vital. But of course, training people to think. I mean, we're not particularly strong in philosophy. As a university, we're a STEM university where we have business school, law schools, and we're just investing £80 million in a brand new engineering building. We invested £50 million in a brand new science building. That's how we're responding. But training people to think is also going to be vital. Philosophers and humanities are people who will change the way we think and encourage us to be creative and adapt. So, as much as it's not an important area to our university, I would make a plea that they're not wandering lonely as a cloud in a carpeted corridor. However, for us, our bread and butter is delivering the nurses, teachers, engineers, scientists, and what we have to do is an education that is incredibly flexible, and that isn't good enough yet. Being able to hop on and off, go out and work, come back, it's very difficult the way we fund it, the way we structure it. We're not creative enough yet. And where we need companies will drive us. They'll nail our feet to the floor to do this. And that's where organizations, the more we look out, the more we have to adapt. And we're open to it. But we've worked recently on a major educational project for the county, and Wilmot Dixon, Ocado, BAE Systems, MBDA, GSK, all those large corporates in the county all worked really, really hard with us. And we don't always get the support from the absolute blue chip as a post-92. And that's where people like the LEP, Adrian at Stevenage Development Board, the Growth Hub, they absolutely supported us and drove those companies into the university. So that partnership is so vital. But apprenticeships, part-time apprenticeships, working more in partnership with companies, we do it. We don't do it enough, even now. And I think University of Hertfordshire have been at it for sort of 10, 12 years.
What do you need to in order to accelerate that, in order to do more of it, Julie?
I mean, it's easy to blame systems, isn't it? The funding system for higher education isn't particularly easy to work with, to do that. I think it's getting better, but it's difficult. The rigidity of the quality assessments around higher education is very rigid. So the systems and the processes that we have to report into are not as flexible. And certainly, I think government are really listening to that. I think we will see changes. So I think there's something around that. I've talked about culture. We have to work harder at changing our own culture. I think post-92 universities like ours are much better at that. And I think sometimes it's quite sad because people talk about universities and what they're actually talking about is a certain type of university. And sometimes we get clobbered from both ends because government tend to think that a lot of their policy is about driving the elite universities, and that often clobbers us from that point of view.
Yeah.
And then when people are moaning about them, what they're actually moaning about is that elite.
Yeah.
It isn't us. And, you know, we're having to really, the alliance universities are having to work very hard to say, we are driving that skills agenda. We do work with organisations. Of course, we can do it better. Of course, we need more support. But the blue chip organisations, some, and not the ones I've just named, obviously we are working with them, but many of them will not work as well with us, and they will believe that when they do the milk round, it is the more elite universities. And so I think getting rid of, and we talk about post 92, for goodness sake, you know, this sector, we've been around, people have come through, been born, studied, they're in work, and we still talk about this divide. And I think that has to go. We are doing the heavy lifting with widening participation, with levelling up, and with delivering skills that the companies want. And we need the blue chip companies to actually acknowledge that more. But I think when you get down, and they will shut up, when you get down to medium-sized and to small businesses, that's where you find a much more entrepreneurial open mind. And those companies are absolutely happy to work hand in glove with us.
It's all about collaboration, but of course all of this is about people, isn't it? We're trying to create better outcomes for the people of Hertfordshire, and health and well-being is absolutely at the core of that. So the final part of our conversation today is with Professor Burstow, who, as chair of Hertfordshire and West Essex Sustainability and Transformation Partnership. Could you start by translating that, Paul? What is that partnership, and tell us a little bit about its work with the Growth Board?
Yes, and maybe the first thing to say is that sustainability and transformation partnerships are the old currency of describing what we are trying to build, which is a different way of working between the NHS and other key players across the public sector and beyond, and to shift the dial away from simply being about fixing people when they are ill to an approach which is about really getting serious about prevention and trying to bend the demand curve for traditional health services. So, you know, over the last 19 months, we've all been responding to the pandemic, all of us, and we've been adapting to each of the waves that have taken place over that period. And I think we've been doing things differently as a consequence of that within the NHS, across the wider public sector. And that's been a powerful driver for collaboration and innovation. But as we come into this third year of the pandemic, obviously from a healthcare perspective, we have to restore services, we have to tackle backlogs, because the longer people are in need of treatments of one sort or another, surgery, etc., that's having an impact on their ability to be economically fully active in the workforce. And I take this thread that's been throughout all of this conversation about how do we invest in and develop our labour markets, how do we invest in and develop human capital across the county of Hertfordshire and beyond. And in a way, the health equation is not just about delivering ever better healthcare services. It is actually about addressing those causes of ill health and the drivers of better health, being engaged in creating health. And that's where we have to work as a partner, whether it's with academic partners, whether it's with our local government partners at all levels, whether it's with industry and business as well. And that's what an integrated care system really has the opportunity to be, not just managing the current, but actually trying to create something different in the way in which we manage health and actually promote well-being across the county.
Thanks, Paul. And how's that going to link in with this kind of growth agenda that we've been talking about, this this drive to balance the needs of sustainability and the need to provide 100,000 homes and 100,000 jobs across the county? Well, first, we need to create a sustainable healthcare model itself. How do we do that? We have to do that by being much more focused on those causes of ill health and addressing those opportunities to improve health from the outset. But I'll give an example, really. We've been talking throughout this session today about the need to skill up our workforce, the need to address the current and very pressing pressures within labour markets in the UK, which are overheating. And health is a key determinant of the long-run size and quality of our talent pools, of our labour market. So seeing healthy lives
as being a key component in economic prosperity is, I think, one of the things that has meant we as a system, the integrated care system, have been really pleased to be invited to be part of the growth board, because we think health is an underpinning enabler of so much else, not healthcare, health itself. And it's about making sure we shift that focus to recognize the conversation has to be not just about delivering great healthcare when you need it, because hospitals are there to repair, home is where health is created in our communities. So it's about that shift that I fundamentally, as the chair of the integrated care system, want us to see. We all need to know that we have great healthcare when we are ill. We also want to focus more on making sure people stay well in the first place.
What about the health service itself as a contributor to the drive to net zero? I mean, it's a difficult sector, isn't it, in terms of kind of carbon reduction?
Well, it's a complex sector, and across the Hertfordshire and West Essex ICS, we spend about £3.5 billion on healthcare in one way or another. We have a significant footprint economically, and we have a significant footprint in terms of our environmental impact. And across all of the organisations that make up the NHS across Hertfordshire, there is a determination to deliver some of the commitments the NHS nationally has made around reducing our carbon footprint over the next decade. And that's doing all the sorts of things we do, looking at our ways we deliver care, looking at the opportunities that have been talked about today about digital and the opportunity to do more things remotely when that's the right thing to do, looking very much at our medicine and supply chains, making sure that our transport and travel arrangements are, again, taking into account what we've learned during the pandemic about this move to digital and using digital channels where that's an appropriate route. And of course, being innovative. So we also have a big estate. In Watford, we need a new hospital to be built. In Harlow, just across the border into Essex, we need a new hospital to be built. Those hospitals can't be built for the 20th century. They have to be built to be fit for the 21st century. They have to really incorporate the ability to adapt to the climate change we are experiencing and actually contribute to reducing the impact of climate change.
Thanks, Paul. That's really helpful and underlines the sort of some of the fundamental changes to people's lifestyles that are coming through in terms of the provision of really basic services that we've all got used to over decades. So the rugs are being pulled out from under our feet. Things are changing fast, and Linda referred to that earlier when she said that we're going to have to get used to changes to our lifestyles. That there is going to be inconvenience, but there are benefits in terms of the improved access to healthcare and improved health outcomes for people coming from these new setups. I'm just going to turn to kind of close the conversation off to Richard Davidson and just have a look at, we've heard a lot about how the public sector is driving us towards sustainable growth, Richard, and the work of the Growth Board. From your point of view, if you could sort of put on the hat of representing the entire private sector, what's your ask of local authorities, of educational institutions, of the new sort of healthcare structures that are being set up, of the LEP, of the Growth Board? What's your ask of them to help the private sector play its part in delivering sustainable growth?
Did you just leave the hardest, biggest question for me? I think the ask had been is one of the reasons behind supporting the Hearts Growth Board was giving us greater clarity on that medium to long-term plan, because that allows us to then think about how we invest in our people, we invest in R&D, about how we change our systems. Many businesses in the UK have all declared a climate emergency and have set a 2030 target, and we're no different to that. So we've got our plans. We need to make sure they work in with the public sector. And then the other thing is I quite like the idea of be demanding, but be realistic with those demands. And I think that all comes around. The whole purpose of this vehicle is to help us see that picture of the future. And we know that there are others you need to speed up. But yeah, a clearer picture. That's what we're looking for.
Well, I mean, I hope that we've helped provide that today. Certainly, the response to the poll says that almost all of our viewers have found this extremely useful today. So thank you very much indeed, panel. And viewers, while you join me in thanking our brilliant panel, we are going to thank you most of all for sparing your time and lending us your attention for the last hour. We really appreciate that. And on your behalf, thank you to Professor Paul Burstow from the Hertfordshire and West Essex Sustainability and Transformation Partnership, and thank you to Neil Hayes from the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and thank you, Councillor Linda Hasey from East Hertfordshire District Council, and thank you, Professor Julie Newland, MBE from the University of Hertfordshire, and thank you, Councillor Richard Roberts from Hertfordshire County Council and the Hertfordshire Growth Board, and thank you, of course, Richard Davidson of Wilmot Dixon, both for your contribution to the conversation and for sponsoring the event and making it possible in the first place. Panel, I hope our panel has whetted your appetite, viewers, to do business with Hertfordshire and to play your part in delivering ambitious and sustainable growth across the county. But as I say, in the meantime, thank you for tuning in, for gracing us with your attention. There were lots of questions in the Q&A, and we'll be distributing those to the panel and making sure that responses come to you over the next few days. We're going to be back on the 25th with a wide-ranging one-to-one interview with the irrepressible leader of Barking and Dagenham Council and the Deputy Chair of Housing and Planning at London Councils, Councillor Darren Rodwell. Registration details for that should be in the chat. And we're going to have details soon of more opportunities to engage with Hertfordshire's decision makers. Watch this space for that over the coming days. But in the meantime, from our fantastic panel, from Wilmot Dixon and from me and everyone at 3 Fox, thank you and good afternoon.